Welcome, Nick, to Digital Duniya podcast. This is a series we are doing with the projects, right? So, RocketPool has been one of my favorite projects for years now, and I've been following it. And it's a really pleasure to have you from RocketPool team come over and help us understand a little bit about RocketPool. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm from New Zealand. You might be able to tell from my accent, and I do marketing and community for RocketPool, which is enough to keep me pretty busy. There's always a lot going on in the RocketPool ecosystem. Looking forward to the chat.
Thank you, Nick. So, Nick, as I mentioned to you, just to give premises to our listeners, what we are doing is we are going to cover a little bit about you and your journey in Web3. Obviously, you've already mentioned to me that you are a Kiwi from South Island, so that's very interesting. We'll speak about that. Then the second part is your journey in Web3 and how you ended up being with RocketPool. And the third segment, the meteor, the most interesting one, about learning about RocketPool, how it all began, and where are we heading. So that's the three segments predominantly. But feel free to throw in anything that you feel is appropriate or you would like to, or something good to know about the project. Okay. So let's start with you. So tell us about a little bit about yourself and your journey in Web3.
All right. Well, I think my story is similar to a few people out there. An initial kind of passive interest in what was going on grew over time. The catalyst for me was really DeFi Summer. At that point, I realized that there are some interesting and useful things happening in the ecosystem, and that got me a little bit more interested. From there, that kind of gradual increase of awareness grew pretty rapidly, and yeah, that pretty quickly led me to where I am now, where I've been doing some pretty fun stuff for RocketPool for over 18 months now. So 2023 in particular was quite exciting. So just over a year ago, towards the start of the year, I hadn't been with RocketPool for very long, but there was a lot of attention on liquid staking protocols, which is obviously what RocketPool is. We can get into that in a bit. That was going into what was called the Chapella upgrade for Ethereum itself in around April of 23, enabling withdrawals. So yeah, there was a lot going on, and I kind of see some parallels now with things like restaking and a potential ETF coming up. There's always something happening, it seems, in the world of Ethereum.
So, as I understand, Nick, your journey started in 2020, which is most commonly known as DeFi Summer. Drawing some parallels, my journey started around the same time. And as I mentioned to you, the more I learn, the less I know, and the more I want to know. So I think it's a common thread for a lot of us into the field and the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you could tell us about your journey from that DeFi Summer 2020 to how did you ended up getting to RocketPool?
Well, when I joined RocketPool, the core team was pretty small, I believe. There were only 5 members at the time. So that's pretty impressive for, both the significance and the size of RocketPool. Back then, the growth rate was still relatively strong. But now, even though the team is a little bit bigger, I think we're up to about 9 people. The amount of TVL that the protocol has, which is around 4 billion, surely is one of the highest ratios of team members to TVL. So that was an interesting, I guess the culture was quite interesting joining such a small team, but such a productive team, especially since, coming from a more traditional role in the corporate world, as I think many people do at some point, there can be a lot of contrast, instead of working with hundreds or thousands of employees in a pretty well-defined structure, it's more like working for a startup. You have to wear a lot of hats. I did a lot of things on the non-technical side and still do everything from business development through to writing copy, social media, things like that, events as well. So a kind of bit of a single swim approach, I guess. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, thankfully I had already a bit of experience working on contracts with small teams in the traditional corporate world, but I was familiar with that kind of structure really. which can be otherwise a little bit of a shock. I think you have to be quite comfortable in environments that are rapidly shifting and deal with a lot of ambiguity, and especially in a remote team like RocketPool, everyone working from their homes or wherever, even more so. It was about 6 months, I guess, until I first met the other team members.
Wow.
So yeah, all done online up to then. It was pretty fun.
That's a remarkable story, right? So RocketPool, such a huge name in the crypto world, right? In blockchain, and not only such a huge name from I've been on outside, and all the things that I've learned about RocketPool, all the conversation that happen around RocketPool are very strong in regards to the ethos of Ethereum community and the credibility score. I wish there was a way to measure it, right? RocketPool would definitely get a lot of high scoring on that score. And obviously, with leader finance, and there's a constant conversation happening, and RocketPool is thrown around with leader finance. And I know this story from first-hand experience, because back in late 2021, when RocketPool launched rETH, right, I've been following that journey, and it was always competing, the underdog and the big dog with leader finance. And it's just remarkable what RocketPool has achieved. And especially, I still can't believe the team only consists of 9 people. That's remarkable. I'm blown away to know that it's only 9 people. So what was your, also for our listeners, this is going to be quite interesting. How did that shift happen to you, right? How were you able to crack something like RocketPool? That would be quite interesting to know, if you could share about that.
I think the main thing for me was a genuine interest in what was going on and what was being built, because unfortunately, unlike a lot of things in this industry, RocketPool had a really genuine use case and real utility potential, whatever you want to call it. So that kind of drew me in as being kind of an example of how DeFi and blockchain technology can be used. For RocketPool, lowering the barrier of entry to running an Ethereum node is a pretty worthwhile cause. And especially at the time, it really only was RocketPool trying to push the boundaries in this area. Most other liquid staking protocols permissioned with their node operators, so they'll only let certain people, usually large companies, operate nodes. But with RocketPool, anyone can be a node operator. You're probably aware it's been like that from day one. Whether you count day one as the official mainnet launch in late 2021, or when the founder Dave started working on the protocol back in 2016, the goal had always been to align as much as possible with Ethereum's core values, to help to promote things like credible neutrality of Ethereum, help to protect that, and to try and get as many people all around the world running nodes, really make it as accessible as possible. Something also that I noticed quite early on and was of interest to me was the genuine community that had kind of sprung up around RocketPool. Well, I guess maybe sprung up isn't the right term. It was grown over several years, and I feel that word can be oftentimes a little bit of a dirty word maybe, or misunderstood, or used incorrectly. But when you do have permissionless node operators, anyone being able to join, what you get is kind of an attraction of people interested in getting the node, first of all, set up and keeping it online. And that's a bit of a learning experience. It can be looked at as something negative, as in, oh, this is daunting. This might require me to spend a weekend studying, but really you're gaining knowledge, right? And you're becoming, you're increasing your experience and understanding of this new technology. But once people have kind of gotten up to that level of having some understanding, a few of them will tend to stick around and sort of help the next wave of people coming along to launch their nodes. So that creates genuine interactions. It creates a bit of an anchor, helps to keep people discussing the protocol and working on it. So that was kind of a double-edged sword, I guess. On the one hand, you have a community that is a great resource for new people including that would have been myself at one point.
Sorry to interject, Nick. I need to make a point over here. Like, it is a daunting task, right? So I have thought about running the nodes, and I just get cold feet, and I've not been able to do that. It's on my to-do list. At some point, I should be running a node for myself. And before we get into the nitty-gritty and more understanding about RocketPool and the whole decentralized DNA that RocketPool imbibe, I just want to bring you back to the point of how did you get a start. The reason I feel that's really important, because that over here with Digital Duniya, what we are trying to do is we are trying to reach out to as many people, share them amazing, inspiring stories. So what your journey could have been, right? That could inspire so many young people across the world, and they get a hope that maybe we can also participate in this industry. I hope that makes sense.
So, yeah. So it was primarily due to that interest and curiosity that I had in the protocol that kind of helped me to be able to devote a lot of time into studying what was being built. So the protocol has a lot of documentation. The community are very active. They're always discussing a lot of things. And that allowed me to kind of prepare pretty well for a couple of interviews for the role. And then quickly get up to speed in terms of performing my role for the protocol. So I think that kind of flow of, first of all, something interesting being built, something genuine being built, that attracted me, and it made it a lot easier to be able to devote time. My background isn't on the technical side, but I was able to understand the kind of basics to perform my role.
So would it be fair, just if I was to put in 3 steps for layman, because most of our listeners, wherever they will be listening, their understanding of blockchain, Web3 or crypto is going to be really basic or entry level point. So just putting in 3 steps that I can grasp from what you just said, if you could just confirm that. So you've been part of the community for a long time. You spend a lot of time and effort understanding the documents, white papers, whatever would be published by RocketPool. And in the process, when there was an opening, you put your hand up, and that's how you got opportunity. Maybe it could be Twitter, Telegram, or Discord, something like that. Would that be fair?
For me, it was really a much more compressed process of once I saw that RocketPool were looking for someone, I then went and devoted quite a lot of time to that process. But the way you've outlined is probably a good way to go about things, because there are protocols out there like RocketPool where there's a lot going on in terms of governance. Maybe we can get into that in a little bit later. There's a protocol DAO, always discussions going on about what work can be done to improve the protocol. So whether it's a position on a more traditional team or work through a DAO, which is another great opportunity. Devoting some time to hanging out, and whether that's, as you say, Telegram, Twitter, Discord, and understanding a protocol is a great first step. And I think a lot of people might be surprised. You probably don't need to spend too much time to get into like the top level of understanding for a protocol. Even something relatively technical like RocketPool, you could probably hold your own in terms of a discussion with the community if you just put a little bit of time into understanding some of the basics.
That's excellent. And I give you, my experience has been in finance through and through. My exposure has been in corporate world like yours. And since 2020, right, DeFi summer, you get into the rabbit hole and you just can't come out. You just keep on going deeper and deeper. And that's how my journey began. And to our listeners, wherever they are, if you're interested, if you genuinely connect to the core ethos, understand the technology, you can build up it. You don't need to put in a lot of time. A compounding impact works really fine over a period of 6-12 months. And you'll be surprised most of the times how much you have gained in 6-12 months if you stick on to that approach. So I completely agree to that. Thank you for that, Nick. Now let's jump into RocketPool. So just to give some structure for listeners, for ourselves. So what are we going to do about? We're going to talk about the token, RPL. which is RocketPool. Not much, just a brief understanding of how it is, what purpose it solves. The second point we are going to talk about is rETH, and probably the last segment, which could be the chunkier segment, and I'll be really interested, is about nodes, right? RocketPool nodes. So if you could start on with RPL token.
Sure. So the RPL token is something that has a couple of different use cases within the RocketPool ecosystem. It'll come up again towards the end when we talk about nodes. It is a requirement to run a node with RocketPool to hold and stake some of these RPL tokens. There are upgrades being rolled out to the protocol in the future that will make it a lot easier for this RPL token component to be carried out by a separate party. So right now, if you want to run a node, it's a requirement for you to hold and stake this RPL. In the future, maybe a separate party can carry out this role. But for now, it is a requirement. That RPL can be penalized if you misbehave as a node operator. That is very unlikely. Again, probably something we'll come back to later on, but it does provide that role, as well as something that a lot of similar tokens do, which is in terms of governance, provide voting power. One of the differences with RocketPool, though, is in many protocols, simply holding the token will provide you with voting power. But for RocketPool, it needs to be staked in a node in order to have governance power. What that means is it's not possible for a party to come in and buy up a lot of tokens and have control over the protocol. It also means that if there was, for example, a VC fund or someone else who acquired a large number of tokens early on for a relatively low price, it would mean that they weren't able to control the protocol either. So these are some of the things that are quite common elsewhere, but is not the case for RocketPool. So RocketPool's governance is quite strong. There's an upgrade being rolled out in the next few weeks that will improve this, improve the decentralization, improve the resilience of the governance. But already, just by being able to avoid that capture by large, powerful entities, makes RocketPool a lot different than many of the other protocols that you'll see elsewhere. Probably the final main role that the RPL token has is that it provides funding for the protocol. So this includes things like the team. Most of the team members work on upgrades to the smart contracts and other parts of the protocol roughly every 6 months. So as I said, there's an upgrade coming out soon. There'll be another one towards the end of the year. The DAO also receives some funding via the RPL token. And the DAO members use this for a lot of very important roles within the RocketPool ecosystem. Things like providing liquidity incentives, and funding a whole lot of different work within the protocol. Kind of what I alluded to earlier, there's a committee that can make payments in the RPL token to people who assist the protocol to grow, essentially. And there's a large number of roles that people carry out. Some of it's on the media and marketing side by creating awareness about all the great things happening within the protocol. Some of it's providing day-to-day support in the support channel in Discord. Some of it's researching potential future upgrades for the protocol. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, and that funding role is pretty important as well. That's RPL in a nutshell.
And to sum it up, as I understand, right, RPL token, and I am aware in some ways, but thank you for shedding light. There's so much utility built in RPL token that basically what you're trying to say is it is attracting the right people to hold the token for right reasons. There will be speculations. We can't avoid that comes with the territory. But it has got real strong functions and mechanism built in, which can take away a lot of that speculation. Would that be fair in saying, recapping it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. There will always be speculation in any asset, whatever it is. But yeah, the main goal of RPL is to carry out those functions I mentioned earlier. As a result of this, for example, a lot of team and DAO members don't see a whole lot of utility in having the token available on centralized exchanges. Of course, it is available on most major exchanges, and it's always great to have another avenue for people to acquire it. But at the end of the day, if you want to use RPL, most of the main use cases are in the world of DeFi, where you're holding it yourself in a wallet. So yeah, that's really the main focus, not necessarily people holding it as part of speculation or investment. Of course, everyone's free to do as they wish, but it would be great if the token can be put to use in the ecosystem. And that means getting it off exchanges, getting it into wallets, getting it staked in nodes.
On-chain is the place to be if you're looking at RPL. So let's jump into the next point, which is rETH, RocketPool ETH. It has been a spectacular journey I've seen and observed from late 2021 till now, as you mentioned, that going from pretty much nothing to 4 billion in DVL. It's an amazing story. And most people, or most normies, as we say, right? If something 1/10 of a fraction happens in some industry, gets so much of coverage and so much of hype. But part of the reason what we are doing is to make sure that we educate and highlight not only the stories, but also the achievements of amazing projects like RocketPool. So give it back to you if you want to elaborate on the journey of rETH.
Yeah, sounds good. So I know we're going to talk about node operators later on. They're one half of the two sides to RocketPool. So the node operators, very brief overview, they essentially have a computer device that helps to validate Ethereum transactions. That's really what the blockchain is. But what we want to talk about is the other half, which is the rETH liquid staking token and what that does. So say you don't want the hassle of having to have this computer and make sure it's turned on, connected to the internet, all the software's up to date, and that's something that is like a 24/7 responsibility. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Maybe you travel a lot. Maybe your power grid is not the most reliable, or your Wi-Fi is slow. That's the case for me. So this other option is a lot more passive, and essentially what it involves is using the RocketPool protocol, the smart contracts. A liquid staker, say that's me, I can send some ETH to the protocol, and the protocol will send that out to a node operator, and this node operator with their computer that's validating and confirming transactions on the blockchain, they will stake the ETH, and then a portion of the rewards will automatically flow back to me. So a pretty straightforward process. Either you stake ETH with the RocketPool protocol, or you can exchange it. So rETH is just a token like anything else, like RPL, and that you can swap for it on a decentralized exchange. So that's another way to acquire it. And just by holding this token in your wallet, it will automatically accrue staking rewards. And it does this by increasing in price compared to ETH over time. So if ETH in a certain time period goes from 3,000 to 4,000, rETH might go from 3,000 to 4,100. And that extra price increment is representative of the staking rewards. So pretty straightforward. rETH has been a pretty popular token for people to hold. It's propelled a lot of the growth that we've seen with RocketPool. If you look at the largest protocols by TVL, total value locked, so how many assets are kind of being held in the protocol, RocketPool sits, I think, just below Uniswap right now. So
yes, that's correct.
Pretty large, pretty impressive. And there's a few reasons for this. So I mentioned just holding the rETH token accrues rewards, and a lot of people like myself choose to do this. Maybe that's enough. But there's also a whole lot of integrations that rETH has across the DeFi ecosystem. So for example, you could use a different protocol and take your rETH token and use it to take out a loan denominated in a different currency like USD. That loan, for example, might be self-repaying. So instead of having to pay interest on this loan, if we remember that rETH accrues staking rewards, those rewards can essentially be used to pay off your loan. So a loan with a negative interest rate could potentially be something. There's also more traditional things to do with the token, such as provide liquidity. You could potentially earn some additional rewards there. Although, like with everything in DeFi and even RocketPool itself, it's important to make sure that you're really well informed before doing some of these things. The integrations that rETH has, one of the main reasons is due to the strong liquidity. So there's a lot of liquidity in secondary markets. So it's very easy to swap ETH for rETH and vice versa. You can enter and exit positions without having to really stake or unstake, just by buying and selling on secondary markets. And that makes it quite attractive to a lot of people and to a lot of protocols as well. They need that liquidity to function properly. There's also integrations with, for example, MetaMask and Coinbase Wallet. So you can acquire your rETH through their interface. And yeah, because of that, rETH liquid staking is very popular. Because, as I mentioned recently, the node operators for RocketPool are permissionless, which means anyone can do it. RocketPool helps liquid stakers to avoid some risks that you might have elsewhere. These kind of centralization risks where you send your assets to a party like an exchange and you have to trust that they will do the right thing. For RocketPool, instead, you're trusting the smart contracts. There's no people that you have to essentially trust. Instead, you're trusting the smart contracts. So that is, for a lot of people, a more attractive proposition. They don't want to run the risk of having something like FTX happen to them, where they send their coins or their tokens away to another person and don't get them back. As long as the smart contracts behave as they're supposed to in the way that they're built, there's no people pulling switches. Smart contract just sits there and it does what it's supposed to do. So a lot of people like that approach. The increased decentralization that RocketPool has also means lower risks in some areas.
That's a amazing summary of our I don't think I would have been able to pull it off. And what I'm going to do once again is summarize in a very layman terms, right? So more people can understand. So, and correct me if I'm wrong or I'm saying something that's not right, right? So as I understand, if I was to put Ethereum, considering that Ethereum equals to whatever money or whatever currency I hold in my bank account in a deposit or a savings account, it's generating interest on it, right? So for rETH, it's something similar, which is decentralized, deposited. It is earning staking rewards of Ethereum via the node operators. And that is the part one of the mechanism. It is compounding interest earned on my Ethereum just by holding rETH. So if I was to buy when it started, I know late 2021, one rETH was equal to one ETH. But as we progress in time, the ratio of rETH versus ETH is constantly keep on changing. The reason being is rETH is getting compounding rewards on top of the ETH not even year in, day on day, week after week, month after month, year after year. So obviously, when my entry point, say for example, if I started off with one ETH and I converted it to one rETH in late 2021, and if I hold it for 10 years, when I swap it back my one rETH, I could get, maybe just putting a random numbers, 3 ETH out of it, purely because I've compounded earnings over 10 years. So that's my first part of understanding rETH. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's it. Right now, that ratio that you mentioned is about 1.1. So that means since rETH launched, someone who bought in on day one has earned a total of 10% in staking rewards.
Yeah. So that's amazing, because not only you still get to hold your Ethereum, but more importantly, not in dollar terms, but just in Ethereum terms, your Ethereum has appreciated by 10%. Yep. So thank you for that. So that's part one. Part two, as you mentioned, when it comes to the utility part of it, right? So there are two facets to it, as I understand. One is I don't have the bandwidth, as I've confessed before, and I find it a little bit more challenging to run a node. So my option would be is instead of running node directly and doing the whole operations for running the node, I am just going to go out on any of the decentralized exchange, convert my ETH into RocketPool ETH, which is rETH, and just hold on to my rETH because I'm getting the compound return. So that's part one. And the second nuance is, while I'm holding my rETH and it's idle and earning compound return of staking rewards, I have got other utilities as well, as what you explained. I can use in DeFi as collateral and borrow against it, or I can provide liquidity on decentralized exchange and earn fees on that, or there could be many use cases which may happen as of now or increase in future. So there is going to be even more utility available for rETH. Would that sum it up correctly?
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. So thank you for that. And I'm always mindful that, all the stories, all the learnings we get, we try and compress it in a really basic form so that it reaches out to the more and more people can understand, and hopefully they can, if they want to, they can participate. So thank you once again, Nick, to give us such an amazing understanding on rETH and the utility it has. Now, moving on to the most important or most interesting segment I hope we can create, and that's about RocketPool nodes. I am really fascinated to learn more about that from you. So take it on.
All right. So probably a term that more people would have heard than Ethereum nodes is Bitcoin miners. And this is something quite similar, not to get too much into the detail, but Bitcoin is a proof of work consensus mechanism, which is what Ethereum used to be as well. At a high level, whether you're talking about a miner or a node operator, essentially it's a similar kind of thing. Someone has a computer device, as I mentioned earlier, three important things, connected to power, connected to the internet, and the software is up to date. And that computer is essentially performing checks and making sure that the blockchain keeps working. So under a proof of work system, the miner with this hardware can be paid rewards for doing this work. So there's an economic incentive. Under proof of stake, the workload is a lot smaller. So for Ethereum, you don't need a high-powered device that draws a lot of electricity. In fact, the computer that you need to be a node operator with Ethereum can be as low as a few $100s, and it will draw about as much power as an LED light bulb. So you can simply put it in a closet and let it run away and tick over, and it will be just fine. So not too difficult there, but there is a catch, and it's in the name, proof of stake. So your device doesn't use as much power, it's not as expensive, but instead what the node operator has to do is they have to put some of their capital at stake. So the capital being ETH, Ethereum, usually you have to put 32 ETH and you have to stake that, and it's essentially a good behavior bond. 32 ETH is obviously quite a lot, maybe in dollar terms a little bit less than it was a few days ago, but still I think for most people, even if they had that much in terms of their net worth, they're probably not comfortable putting it all into a single asset, being ETH, and then staking that entirely. So the barrier of entry is quite high financially. Of course, there's a lot of people out there that couldn't dream of even holding 32 ETH. So for them, Ethereum's proof of stake system is essentially off limits because of the financial requirement there. So what RocketPool does is helps to lower the barrier of entry. So instead of 32 ETH, you're only going to need 8 ETH plus some RPL tokens. So yeah, with RocketPool, you don't need 32 ETH, you just need 8 ETH plus some RPL tokens that I mentioned earlier. In the future, that could be even lower. So there's a lot of research and study being done. Is it safe to have only a 4 ETH good behavior bond, maybe even 2, or in the future 1? So on the financial side, making it a lot more accessible to a lot more different people all around the world. That increased diversity is good for decentralization. We don't want all the nodes to be in Sydney, Australia. If there's a storm and there's a power cut or the nodes go offline, that's really not good. We want lots of different people on different power grids using different internet providers, different hardware in different countries with different regulations. That makes Ethereum stronger. So the second part is the technical requirements. So it is likely not as daunting as it may appear to a lot of people. If it's something that interests you, and you're willing to put in the time to study and learn about Ethereum and running a node, and you're comfortable around computers, then it's something that is probably accessible to you. But RocketPool puts out software that streamlines a lot of this setup, and there's also great support that I alluded to earlier. So if your node, your computer suddenly dies or goes offline, you can go and get usually help within just a few minutes. Someone has probably gone through that same experience before, and they'll be able to provide you some tips on what to do to get your node back online. Most people, once everything's set up and running, they maybe check in on the node once a month, spend a few minutes. Other than that, they might get alerts if there's a problem every now and again. But usually it is quite a passive kind of set and forget activity. Personally, I don't run a node, but people who I know who have run a node, the original, or we call it a solo way with 32 ETH, it's quite a lot more difficult. RocketPool makes things a lot more easier, and that's this kind of second way that RocketPool helps to make node operation a lot more accessible. A big part of this is the great documentation that's available to read through. And there's also increasingly video content being put out. So yeah, the one final point I'll make about running a node is we don't want to make it too easy. So sometimes people say, well, this is nice, but maybe it could run on my phone, or I could just click a button. Why do I have to have some technical knowledge? And the reason is that running a node, while the rewards are nice, primarily a responsibility to keep Ethereum alive, because if node operators don't know what to do when they encounter a small issue, then potentially that node can go offline. If too many nodes go offline, then we can have a problem keeping the blockchain running. So there's always a bit of a balancing act. We want to make it more accessible, but not too accessible. So as Ethereum itself continues to change and grow over time, RocketPool does the same. As I said, 2 upgrades a year being put out, and along the way, a lot of great study being done by both the team members and the DAO members to ensure that the protocol is always trying to push the boundaries and make node operation as available as it can be to everyone.
That's a lot to take on, and I'm sure that for many of us, it's going to be another rabbit hole. If we are interested, get in, look at the papers, understand the requirements. And the most amazing thing, because I know back in the day, there was, instead of 32 ETH, it was 16 ETH. And then when the mini pool happened from 16 to 8, that just lit me up, because I feel that, okay, this is something that now I can participate, and I can take this challenge. And if it goes to 4, even better, because it will encourage a lot more people who are interested in Ethereum, who are interested in running a node or experimenting with it, right? Just because the first time is always the learning time, and the capital outlay is so high considering the price of ETH. And not any financial advice, but I like to believe that it's just going to be a lot harder and harder for people to get even 4 ETH, right? So it's really nice to know that you guys are already thinking ahead, where there could be a possibility of being able to run a node with 2 ETH or 1 ETH at some point in future. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I hope our viewers and listeners will get a lot of value out of it. More importantly, we are reaching out to that segment of the society as a whole globally, which are not familiar or not as aware as we have been fortunate enough to be. So thank you again, Nick. I really appreciate your time and effort.
Not a problem. A couple of closing remarks. When you're thinking about running a node, there's also something called a testnet. So essentially, you can do all the same steps, but you don't have to have any Ethereum ETH of your own. You're doing it with assets on a testnet, so they don't have any dollar value. So that's an easy way to kind of play around and get familiar with things. Zero risk there. And the second thing is the RocketPool Discord is a great place. You can find that from the website, which is rocketpool.net, or go to Discord directly, which is discord.gg/rocketpool. You can ask a whole lot of questions about RocketPool, about staking in general, really anything. There's a lot of great people that like to hang out, and there's no such thing as a silly question. So if you're curious, jump in, and there'll be someone who can help you to start your learning journey with staking and RocketPool.
Thank you for that, Nick. We'll definitely, I've been on RocketPool Discord probably since I think middle of 2021. So I highly encourage. I've not been as active as I was before, but from my experience, anyone who is interested in running node, that's the place to be. That's your first starting point. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Keep following us. Keep asking questions. Keep exploring. Until next time, from the digital Duniya.